Oh, well, it's I.B.D. in the USA. We're gonna look at this problem from every which way. Completely unbiased observation of the current situation. Yeah.
Hello everyone. A couple of days ago, a breakthrough study was released in Nature magazine. I'm sure many of you have seen this. It concerns the underlying mechanisms that cause IBS. The article was released in Nature magazine, which is widely considered the Super Bowl of science. If you're concerned about its legitimacy, this is where all the best studies and breakthroughs in science are usually released. It addresses the underlying mechanisms that cause IBS, the involvement of what's called histamines or mast cells. It takes a deep look into the immune system and how it could work against us in various ways, one of which being irritable bowel syndrome. The second paragraph actually aligns quite well with my current theory on the underlying problems with Western medicine. It says, very often, these patients are not taken seriously by physicians, and the lack of an allergic response is used as an argument that this is all in the mind, and that they don't have a problem with their gut physiology, says Professor Guy Bowick-Stans, a gastroenterologist at KU Leuven and a lead author of this new research. With these new insights, we provide further evidence that we are dealing with a real disease. What they seem to conclude is that we need to be looking at an antihistamine approach towards the prevention of these mast cell antigens from occurring in the first place, and the results seem pretty conclusive. Further testing is being done, and I'll be following this pretty closely myself, as this seems to be a legitimate medicinal approach to the prevention of this disease. Of course, this, like most medications, will work better in accompaniment with proper diet and exercise monitoring, and I really can't stress this critical factor enough with the prevention and management of this disease. There hasn't been any mention of actual treatments yet, but I assume their approach is going to be coming from the the 5-ASA aminosalicylic acids or sulfapyridines, like those found in the medication sulfasalazine, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. For a deeper look into the broader concepts of IBS, I like to turn to biology. Manolis Kolis is a professor at MIT and head of the computational biology department. He talks about inflammatory bowel syndrome as having two major factors that work against us: the inflammatory side, which is immune responses, and bowel disease, which is actual digestion. He says that we're not simply passive observers of our genetics, but we can actually have a manual impact on them. We can bypass our negative genetic traits by exercising and using various treatments. I'm actually a big fan of the Wim Hof method, believe it or not. There actually seems to be some really good research behind it, considering that the man has allowed himself to be tested in just about every way possible. His breathing exercises and cold shower, cold shock protein activation system seems to be quite successful. There are people that have shown really good results from this. One person's actually kept their Crohn's disease off for over 10 years now, which is unheard of as far as I've seen. The best I've seen is every 3 or 4 years someone seems to just say that my Crohn's has come back, or it's time for me to come out of remission again, and this seems to be the overall narrative that leads I.B.S. and Crohn's and colitis. This cold shock protein activation system seems to work to bypass our parasympathetic nervous system, which is extremely promising, and we've seen results where this has actual impact on the immune system and immune responses. When we think about IBD, we need to be considering the absolute necessity to deeply monitor our condition and our progress. If you'll allow me to wax political for a moment, I believe the underlying problems in this country are that we have a tendency to prescribe medicine and not check up on the patient afterwards, and this seems to be an issue that persists in various other departments, including anxiety and depression treatment. The problem with the current culture in the US, which I'll expand on in future videos, is that we have a tendency to go to the doctor, get a prescription prescribed, and then not see the doctor again. We like to just set it and forget it, but unfortunately something like IBS and IBD, these are not things that we can simply just forget. We also have a tendency, myself included, to go back to foods that we probably shouldn't be eating. We say things like, well, I've been in remission for a while now, I can get away with a little bit of ice cream. And even if that may be true, we don't really stop to consider the internalization of the stressors that we face at work, and the various exposures we have to mood-altering experiences and substances that we ingest every day, and how this can subconsciously add up. All of these exposures and internalizations can eventually work against us, and so when we do give in and actually eat the ice cream, that can end up being the straw that broke the camel's back, and this triggers a flare-up. I want you to ask yourself, how many times have you actually heard about people reporting the actual cause of their flare-up? What triggered their flare-up this time? It's very rare that people are conscious of it, it just tends to happen. It's often referred to as something that just happens to Crohn's disease sufferers. Every few years they come out of remission. We forget that we can't really perceive the immune responses that happen in our bodies, but we can take steps to prevent them. When it comes to fighting things like autoimmune reactions, as well as anxiety and depression, we tend to take the easy road, and instead of going on with a hands-on approach, it's much easier to take a pill than it is to do things like exercise, because exercise and diet monitoring require a lot more effort, And the results shown from those tend to come up slowly, whereas if you take medicine, it's a one and done. But medication also has lots of side effects. Many times, those side effects can actually lead to worsening of the condition, which has been my own personal experience, which I'll spare you details of, but trust me, it's not fun to have side effects from steroid use. This is not a criticism of anyone's behavior. In a day and age where we can have any kind of dopamine releasing triggers that we want, fast food is right at our fingertips and advertising is right in our face all the time. Of course, it's easier to give in to the things that are presented right there and the solutions that are actually advertised to us. It's become a cultural norm, and as we don't really see it, even though we can see how different diets work in other cultures with internet and TV and have for years now, we still grow up in this culture. We still absorb the behaviors and tendencies of our peers. I do think about this a lot, and it's really unfortunate how it really is thrown in our face with advertising. In fact, it's actually illegal to advertise medication on TV and online in every country except the United States and New Zealand, which kind of says something about how we run US politics and medicine. It brings to mind the idea that humans are used as commodities, which is a theory I've been working on for a while. Not really a theory, it seems pretty obvious to me, to be honest. The things that I've seen in hospitals, the practices, the way patients are treated coming in and out of the door as quick as possible instead of like given time to actually recover from what they're going through. I mean, all arrows point to humans being used as commodities. And this is an issue that I want to address further with the series IBD in the USA. When it comes to things like diet, exercise, and monitoring of progress, I always tend to hear people say things like,
"Ain't nobody got time for that."
This is really never true. We all have the same 24-hour period. It's just how we use that time. We have to make a schedule and stick to it, but make small changes as we go along. It's really hard to do everything all at once. This is usually why New Year's resolutions tend to fail. Now, I say this and it sounds ideal, but in a country like the United States today, we have 20 and 30-year-olds that are struggling just to get by, working 40-hour-a-week jobs, and many of them report being stressed out of their work. Many of them report not wanting to go to work in general, end up celebrating on the weekend, which consists of things like drinking and eating bad foods, which diverts your schedule. It makes you have a baseline schedule that you keep throughout your work week, where you're eating lunch at the same times, you're eating breakfast at the same times, and you're experiencing relatively the same things. But on the weekend, it completely shifts that, and then you have to shift back 2 days later on Monday. So it's no wonder that the US is in the top 3 of depression and anxiety. We're number 1 in use of antidepressants. When you're in this typical work situation, it's hard to find alternatives other than substance use, drinking, or some type of shifting of the schedule on the weekends. And it's even harder to find accommodations for those things. For example, in Virginia, I qualify for disability because of my Crohn's disease, but right next door in Tennessee, I don't qualify. I mean, this is a horrible inconsistency that's spread all across our land, and there needs to be something done about it, in my opinion. So if I lose my job in Tennessee, I'm pretty much out of luck, which just adds to the underlying stressors that add up to these immune responses. All we can do in this situation is more closely monitor our schedule, more closely monitor our eating and dietary and exercise habits, and try to manage the stressors at work as best we can, be it mantras or self-help meditations, anything you can do to eliminate stressors at work, or at least handle the stressors in the most mature and peaceful way possible. Much of it's internalized. We have a tendency, just being biological humans, to internalize our mistakes and internalize other people's mistakes and react negatively to them with anger, versus exercising things like patience and empathy, which again sounds great, like anyone should just be able to do that. But no, it's very hard, and these are things that you really shouldn't feel bad about. We're raised in a culture that emphasizes these types of reactions, so we really shouldn't feel bad when we have these types of reactions, be it internalization or vocalization outwards towards others. But I digress. We have to do whatever we can to manage our disease in every situation that we're presented. We also have a tendency to perceive our world in medium-sized world, or from the limitations of our Umwelt. The Umwelt is how we evolve to experience our reality. It's the reason that we build things like microscopes to see the microscopic world and telescopes to see the infinite vastness of the universe. These are both worlds that we can't really naturally conceive of, so it's very hard for us to actually conceive of the millions of battles that are going on in our digestive tracts to manage our immune system and the immune reactions that happen. We tend to think things like, oh, I can eat a little bit of this and be okay, not really considering that a gram of food may contain millions of ovalbumin proteins and antigens that cause immune reactions in our system. Now, of course, our immune system tries to do its job when it encounters one of these rarities, but when it encounters them in a high dose with an already compromised immune system, or in combination with outside stressors, or in repeated exposures to the offending antigen, it can easily surprise us with an unwanted reaction. For a deeper look into the medical approach to IBD, I'd like to recommend the YouTube series Medicosis Perfectionalis. No, they don't have any relations to this video or sponsorships or anything, but I do very much enjoy their content as it goes much deeper into the story than what I'm exposing here. I'll link their YouTube series in the description. With this series, I plan on focusing on the broader concepts of IBD. There's plenty of videos out there that you can watch about the medical approaches to it and the history of hospital treatment and etc. But I plan to uncover more of the politics behind the treatment that's going on in this country and more, I wouldn't say alternative approaches to treating these diseases. You should always trust medicine and trust science to do its job. But a lot of times we, as I've iterated earlier in this video, it seems we rely far too heavily on those things. My opinion's always been that we should try to go with the most natural approach first and then try medicine. But of course, if you're already in a flare-up, you're already having issues, definitely go get some medicine, go see a doctor. We don't want to mess around with these kind of things or they're just going to get much worse. I'd just like to focus more on manageable life choices that we can make to be able to cope with these types of diseases. Well, that's all I have for this week. If you have any questions for me on how I personally manage my own Crohn's disease or topics and ideas for future videos, please let me know in the comment section. Keep being awesome, y'all. Spread love, positivity, and empathy everywhere you go. I'm sure that'll reciprocally rub off in your tummy as well. Peace.